welcome to yet another exciting edition of your favorite Sunday morning program, Media Monitor. And that's the show that brings you robust discussions on some of the stories that made headlines throughout this week. We are live here on the SABC News channel. Good morning, I'm Alicia Jali. Thank you for tuning in. And these are the stories that we'll be looking at in this hour. We look at the spy tape saga after Zuma lawyers conceded that withdrawing criminal charges against him was indeed irrational. Is the president playing delaying tactics in this case? Find out more later on in our discussions. We'll dig deeper into the ongoing KwaZuluNatal political killings, and the controversial Gupta family are embroiled in another scandal to allegedly hijack the Public Investment Corporation. And finally, we look at the highlights of the double Troika Summit that was held in Pretoria this past week. But first, as always, it is 9 a.m. It is time to take a look at the news that are making headlines. Storms and strong winds in KwaZuluNatal are expected to move up the province's north coast today after wreaking havoc between Durban and Port Edward on the far south coast. Dozens of pictures of the damage caused have been posted on social media. Many roads were blocked and motor vehicles damaged by the uprooted trees. Emergency personnel have appealed to residents to stay indoors, and disaster management teams have been removing and evacuating people from the premises that have been damaged. The injured have been taken to local hospitals. The NC leadership will meet with party members in Umzimkhulu in southern KwaZulu-Natal tomorrow as part of finding out the root cause of the ongoing political killings in the province. Both the provincial as well as national leadership made a commitment at the funeral service of slain former NC Youth League Secretary General Sindiso Magaga. NC Treasurer General Dr. Zweli Mkhize also called for a full-scale investigation into allegations of corruption and wrongdoing at the Umzimkhulu municipality. Well, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has warned ANC members against buying delegates at the party's elective Congress in December this year. Ramaphosa gave the Moses Kotane Memorial Lecture in Dawn Park east of Johannesburg last night. He says delegates must be wary of some elements within the party ranks who hope to use money to influence the outcomes of the conference. All right, let's welcome our guest today. We do have SABC Digital News producer Dini Mekuto. Dini, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a while.
It's a pleasure.
Good to see you.
Good to be here.
Good to see you. And of course, on the main desk, we do have back with us political analyst Mr. Ralph Mateja and media analyst Melo Magolejo, the original Media Monitor crew. Good morning, gents. What a pleasure to have you both back. Thank you so much.
Morning, it's good to be here.
All right, Dini, let's give them entertainment. Let's show Ralph how we do it these days. What has been the biggest story in the digital front this week?
It's been a big week, a little bit of everything from politics to sport to entertainment news. First hashtag that really had people talking, hashtag Zuma SCA. I know you're also going to talk about it.
Yeah.
President Jacob Zuma's counsel advocate, Camp J. Camp, has considered that the NPA's decision to drop the charges against Zuma was irrational. Obviously, people were on Twitter talking about this one.
What are they saying on Twitter?
Musi Maimane had something to say.
What is he
says,
saying?
After 8 years of wasting taxpayers' money on these appeals, Zuma must face prosecution for the 787 charges against him. Hashtag Zuma SCA. Also,
that's Simbongan Mabaso. There says, of course, replying to Musi Maimane's tweet, true, but this will graduate to a civil war. I see the DA reinventing the apartheid wheel.
And then there's also another one from Tepiso Muche, who says, so now that both NPA and President Zuma have considered that Mshe's decision not to prosecute should be set aside, so where to from here?
I suppose
Zuma
that's a
SA.
big question.
That's what people want to know.
Yeah,
where to
that's
from
what
here?
people want to know, Melo. I know we're going to talk about it in greater detail, but what do you think about the social media side of the reactions to the concessions by Zuma's lawyers?
For me, I mean, I'm encouraged that people are actually following the details of this case, and it's important from that perspective. But I think in terms of the one tweet there where Musi Maimane says that they've wasted 8 years of taxpayers' money, I think in my view, there's still going to be a lot of time before actually this thing sees the light of day in a court.
Ralph, a quick one from you?
Well, it is quite a surprise move by the President's legal counsel, abandoning the legal defense that they've sustained for such a long time. One asks, what's next out of this? Are we going to see other attempts to try to keep the President away from having to respond to this, to substantive issues thereof?
We're going to talk about that in more detail just now. Dini, let's go to the next big hashtag of this week. Of course, and he was laid to rest yesterday. There he is.
Hashtag Magaga funeral.
Yeah.
A lot of people were talking about the issues that Les Tuta, who is a close friend or was a close friend of
The
Magaga,
revelations.
raised. The corruption in Umzimkhulu municipality. Ngwako says, hashtag Magaga funeral. Les Tuta told the whole uncomfortable truth. Amatenda anikwa izinkabi, and with the political killings happening there, this calls for concern. Another one for Morakiwa. I am actually worried about Les Tuta's life and that of his family after the sober tribute to his friend. Last one, Zigalala had something to say. As you know, the KZN PEC chair.
Yeah.
He says they will be in Umzimkhulu tomorrow on Monday to listen to some of the issues that were raised by Les Tuta. So Les Tuta taking most of the people's attention on Twitter on this issue.
Very interesting. Hey, Ralph, what do you make of these developments? I mean, funerals have become the place now to voice out any anger or any issues that people might just have amongst their own parties. What's going on?
Indeed, it's a trend within the party where when they go to these funerals, they voice concerns that they should have dealt with within their party. And it points to one thing, that there is no comfort within the party to actually voice this thing openly through the normal platforms. People wait while they are mourning to be able to do this. It's a disturbing development, I think, and we are getting used to it.
Absolutely, and we shouldn't get used to it, Melo.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I mean, because historically within the struggle, obviously funerals were used as sort of like platform to sort of like mobilize people.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting now that we're in a democratic dispensation and there's supposed to be democratic channels through which people can voice these things, but yet funerals still continue to play that role that they played in the struggle.
Yeah, that's what they said about the court case. They were saying there's no proper structures to report these issues. Let's look at another big hashtag.
Last two
Is it good
hashtags.
news?
Hashtag Springboks. No. Depressing news. They lost 57-0 to the All Blacks.
I
Quite
saw that
depressing.
match. Quite painful.
Egbert Buzak said, can you ask them to please stop at 50?
Canal.
And they didn't stop. They went on and scored a try and converted, ended up being 57-0.
Bongani Mtolo says Springboks last man is getting married. It is indeed a sad day in South Africa for us men, really.
And that leads us to our last hashtag, Mini getting married. Hashtag becoming Mrs.
Jones.
And they had to throw
Do you have
shade.
memes for us? I know you're always fun, Dini. Do you have any memes
There's a meme
for
on
us on this
Itumeleng
one?
Kune, who didn't have a great day yesterday after that last minute goal.
Is
And
that
this one
it?
here from Undaba.
Undabezitha.
Kune looking at becoming Mrs. Jones. Ngibabhekile.
Gentlemen, just a quick one as we wrap up the fun segment. Melo.
I think at least the Bafana Bafana weren't playing, so Kune can get a bit of a reprieve.
Ralph.
At least we're going to have to keep up with the Joneses from now, and Kune will have to join the queue like everybody else. Maybe we might have to start at the back, but that's how it is.
Guys, come on. You didn't say anything about the Springbok loss. Melo,
Well,
I
they
want
should
to hear
have.
from you. Ralph?
They couldn't declare. The All Blacks couldn't declare. It's not cricket, you know what I mean? So they couldn't stop at 50. They had to go all the way.
Interesting, interesting. All right, Didi, do tell our viewers where they can get all these stories and more on our YouTube.
For more on these stories, you can visit us on sabc.co.za/news and our YouTube channel, SABC Digital News. You'll also see the finished program of Media Monitor after it has been wrapped up.
Absolutely. That is at exactly 10 o'clock. Thank you, Dini. After the break, we'll take a look at the spy tape saga. Please stay tuned for that. It's all coming up after the break.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the advice of our elders? Is it the actions of our people? or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Welcome back. Well, in a dramatic about turn in the spy tape saga, President Jacob Zuma's lawyers conceded this week in the Supreme Court of Appeals that the decision by the then Director of the National Prosecuting Authority, Concede to withdraw criminal charges against him in 2009 were indeed irrational. It emerged that Mshe did not have the legal authority to review the decision to prosecute, a legal point which appears to have evaded all parties for 8 years. The Democratic Alliance is furious that President Jacob Zuma has dragged the spy tape saga longer for 8 years, only to concede at the last minute. More on this clip.
Can you defend technically the basis at which this decision was arrived at?
No, I'm not defending that.
So you can't defend that. So what we're at idem about is that in terms of the decision and the technically correct aspects, they erred.
I would accept that, Justice Nasser.
Well, let's take a step further. In other words, they made an irrational decision.
Well, that is then correct, yes.
And this signaled the end of the appeal case. President Jacob Zuma's counsel further stated that the timing of serving the indictment was not serious enough not to prosecute. Another concession followed, this time from the NPA, that the wrong statute was used to justify dropping the prosecution.
I reread Liebenberg and it's directly against me.
It's directly against you.
Directly against me.
All right. Thank you.
And in getting to this concession, the justices came down hard on Advocate Mkoteri Mshe's rationality.
In cases of an egregious abuse of power by a prosecutor, which may well warrant a prosecutor deciding that because of this abuse of power, I am going to stop the prosecution. I can accept that. But what he does is he invokes the wrong doctrine. The doctrine abuse of process deals with permanent stays. What I'm putting to you, therefore, is this. That is another indication of a man operating with at least no idea of what he's doing, or alternatively, not applying his mind at all to what he's doing.
It has taken 8 years to get to this point, the legal bill running into millions of rand. The DA says it has spent over 10 million rand.
I think it's been worth every penny because not only for securing this particular outcome, but more than anything else, to make sure that the principle of equality before the law is now very firmly located in case law.
Judgment has been reserved.
You know, I watched for 4 hours this case go on, and the argument stayed on this one pivotal point, the time that the indictment was served, and that's what the lawyers were arguing. But the judges were saying, but that does not trump the fact that there should be a prosecution. And all of this took 8 years, Ralph.
I mean, Alicia, I've watched for the last 8 years this case as it moved from the decision to drop the charges until now. And actually, what Judge Kachalia is saying is that Advocate Mkoteri Mshe has been incompetent.
Yeah.
Just to put it out there, that he said that he relied on a wrong law and so forth. But what is interesting is that President Jacob Zuma's legal counsel now, they're actually agreeing, they are abandoning the position that they have been standing on for these past 8 years, saying that that decision was not irrational. And I wonder exactly what is it that they have in their bag? What is their next line of defense? Because look at this thing. There is some question of honesty regarding this that we need to raise. This case is about to be finalized. It is at the SCA now, Supreme Court of Appeal. Possibly it might go to the Constitutional Court, but now President is saying that no, it doesn't have to go further than that. Let's stop right here. The decision was irrational. It means, therefore, that maybe the President, as the reports are coming, want to make another representation to the NPA. The problem is that the current NPA has got no credibility, also because of how they have handled this. They have went along with this attempt to defend that irrational decision for the last 8 years, and now in the 11th hour, they are trying to abandon that, and any kind of representation they listen to from the President and the decision they make is going to be subject to court. And I think that we should watch carefully how this judgment comes, because this judgment might actually preempt other measures that the President and his legal counsel and also the NPA might want to undertake. I think that the judges are also tired of the manner in which this thing has gone about. It has been there for a long time, and I will agree that at some point it is a waste of taxpayers' money, that the judges will have to come, the court will have to come and say that, look, we bring this to finality. There is no need. This has been a side case for a while. Mr. President, go face those substantive cases. If you believe indeed that you are innocent about this, why are you wasting time talking about discussing you are innocent? Why can't you go straight and do that? So I think that the DA will be pushing this further. No matter what happens, the reality is that they're going to try to review. If the NPA listen to the new representation and they decide then on whatever ground that they are not going to charge the President, it is actually the DA and other opposition parties and civil society will go straight to court. And the court will be so empathetic because they've been led on a merry-go-round for the last 8 years with just the aim to avoid having to have this thing being expedited. The substance of those criminal charges need to be dealt with and adjudicated upon by the court. We should be beyond this issue now. The President should take opportunity and go answer on this.
I mean, I saw Richard Mdluli's comments, and he was saying this was the case that was used to basically shatter his career, and now this, and he says, you know, so there's some sort of redemption in this whole thing. What do you think about this whole case? So do we really blame Mokotedi Mshe for this?
I think for me, listening to the oral arguments, I found something very interesting in the way Kemp decided to argue his case, right? Because then the case sort of pivots on two fundamental issues. The one is motivation, and the other one is wrongful use of law. The issue of motivation would be that if I bring charges against you, but then I have some ill intent towards you, does that nullify the validity of the substantive nature of the charges? And there was an SCA case which says that the motivation doesn't really make a difference. If there is a case to be answered, then that case has to be answered. The second issue in terms of wrongful use of the law, it relates to the issue of the statute that Mokotedi Mshe necessarily quoted when he made that, when he withdrew sort of like the decision to prosecute President Zuma. Now that is the thing that basically was being said in the SCA, that no, that decision to withdraw that thing was irrational, and it's sort of like the arguments that are being presented, it's sort of like procedural irrationality to the extent that he used the wrong law. It does not mean that now if the decision were to go back to Sean Abrahams, there wouldn't be a decision to say that no, actually this thing needs to be withdrawn. So what Kemp, I think, going forward, his strategy is going to be, he's going to say, no, fine, what we're going to do is we're going to use section 179(5)(d) of the Constitution to go and appeal to the NPA to drop the charges. And the thing that he's going to use to appeal those charges is to say that the charges were politically motivated. So if you listen to the SCA was saying, but you're saying that the timing itself is not sufficient to say that the charges cannot be brought forward. Kemp says, no, I agree to that. We're not saying it's just the timing. We say there's a broader conspectus of factors, and that includes like sort of political motivations starting from all the way from 2003. So he's not totally conceding that the thing is politically motivated. He's just saying that the political motivation, you can't make the determination just based on the Leonard McCarthy timing issue. It has to bring more issues into that decision. And then the other thing I think with Mokotedi Mshe is that when he made his decision, he disregarded this issue of a political conspiracy. He just relied on the spy tapes. So obviously that has been thrown out now, saying that he referenced the wrong statute, therefore he can't even make that spy tapes argument. So I think Kemp is going to say that, no, fine, the court is going to issue a judgment now saying that, no, that decision by Mokotedi Mshe is irrational, and then therefore now Sean Abrahams must reconsider the issue anew. Then when Sean Abrahams reconsiders considers the issue anew, then they're going to go to the NPA and make representations. And obviously, if now, the big case now, if Sean Abrahams decides that no, he's going to drop the charges, not going to charge Zuma, the DN them are going to run to court and say that no, but then this thing is wrong and so on. And I think then you might see another year, 2, 3, 4 years of court cases disputing whatever Sean Abrahams' decision is going to be. So I think Sean Abrahams is the pivotal factor in this thing.
But I mean, do you think Sean Abrahams is going to take it upon his stride to just reinstate the 700 and somewhat charges against the president and just take this thing to court so that it's dealt with and done and dusted, Ralph?
Well, there is a question of credibility of the NPA because, and that question of whether the NPA can be trusted to exercise its mind independently.
Before we get any resolution of this matter?
I think that is why the opposition actually council will try by all means to make sure that the discretion to prosecute from this judgment does not solely lie with the NPA.
True.
And I think they've demonstrated so far that the NPA cannot be relied upon on this case. And there is another issue as well that is coming out, that came out in this case, very interesting, that says that actually that decision to prosecute by then was not made by Leonard McCarthy actually. It was your mid-level, or maybe let me say prosecutors below Leonard McCarthy. So you cannot say that they have been, as long as you cannot show that McCarthy maybe as a political head was involved, you cannot make a convincing argument that says there was a political motivation at that point. The problem is that you can contest the court, you can have all this representation as the president, but I think the court as well is going to think about your bona fide as well, the defense that you have led throughout until today, and also you want to modify the very same defense. You are abandoning some part of it without necessarily having to justify it fully in court, because you know that the court is about to finalize this matter. You are pulling that. You're actually taking people far back to actually start this thing. As he's saying, you might have another 3 years or so.
Yeah.
I think that it should not be, and I think there is a precedent on this case that it's not about the NPA having to sit and decide that, oh, the court have said that we might prosecute, we have to decide on that. When this case, when the court rules on this, it could actually automatically mean that the president is actually an accused immediately, without firstly having to go to the NPA to exercise the discretion of that. And I think that in terms of the law, the DA and the council, they can actually approach the court immediately for an urgent form of order which says that the president is immediately an accused once this has been
so
considered
that we get
upon.
clarity.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I think it's likely to go that way. So there will be more push and shovel on this.
But then what would it mean should those charges be reinstated against the president for the president in particular, Melo?
I think the one thing that we need to deal with here is the issue of separation of powers, which featured very prominently in this SCA case, right? They're saying that the judiciary can't dictate to the NPA when to charge and who to charge and what so on. That decision is a discretion that lies solely with Sean Abrahams, right? So I think from that perspective, the only thing that the court can do is set aside the decision by Mokotedi Mpshe. Now, what happens now is that from there on, then the process needs to kick in then from that decision where Leonard McCarthy and them had made the decision that these are the charges to finalize and whatever.
To do the indictment,
So what needs to happen now is that process going from there, whether to deliver that charge sheet to Zuma, then to say that Zuma now must go to court and they have initial bail hearing and so on and so on. Those processes need to go on. I think from
Does that render him president while he's going to court?
Yes, I think it doesn't obviously prejudice his right to be president in that sense, because then there hasn't been a conviction to that extent.
So politically, it's a no-go area. I mean, you're going to have the president who is the accused. I mean, certainly...
but then, I mean, you've also had President Mandela. He's also been in court with Louis Late, that case.
Civil matters and criminal matters are quite different for that matter. So I think that you can challenge... At the center of this case, it's not the challenge of the executive authority of the president. By the way, it's not a challenge about, this is not about a just administrative action where you are challenging the executive authority of the president. At review is not, you're talking about a private person who is supposed to face criminal charges.
Absolutely.
It's a different thing from the work that emanates from President Mandela having exercised his executive authority and being challenged in that manner in court. That is why I'm thinking that if it gets to that point that for one day, for just 24 hours, where the president is a suspect before he can, or the legal counsel can challenge this, there will be any attempt by civil society and maybe the opposition to push on that political aspect while they wait for the legal issues to be expedited.
Okay,
I
maybe
think it gets to that.
just one more point there. So
Very quickly, Melo, we're out of time.
No, it's good. Another point there would be this Constitutional Court judgment on Nkandla, right? It found that there was a serious breach of the Constitution, but yet Zuma is still in office. So I think this thing of charges and there haven't been a final conviction.
This
is
is
a serious one.
The
It's going to
grounds
play
for
into the
them
ground.
to actually
Yes.
impeach the president or even have him removed through the National Assembly means. Well, there seems to be no end in sight in the KZN political killings. We tackle that after the short break. Do stay tuned.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the advice of our elders? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
That's that topic where political killings in KwaZuluNatal continue to hog the news headlines. Slain ANC councillor and former ANC Youth League Secretary General Sindiso Magaka was buried yesterday as the latest high-profile victim to succumb to an assassin's bullet in that province. Magaka was shot along with two fellow councillors in Umzimkhulu back in July. The two councillors managed to survive. Police Minister Fikile Mbalula has promised that those behind the killings will be tracked down and will face the full might of the law. Meanwhile, the ANC KZN leadership met with the party's National Executive Committee on Friday to discuss a way forward after the leadership in KwaZulu-Natal was dealt a heavy blow on Tuesday by the High Court in Pietermaritzburg, where it was effectively disbanded. The KZN leadership now says that they will abide by any decision taken by the NEC on the way forward regarding the Pietermaritzburg High Court's ruling, which declared the 2015 elective conference as being unlawful. Well, joining us from our Durban studio on this segment is, of course, the ANC KZN spokesperson, Ubaba Umdumiseni Ntuli. Sompisi, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Welcome. Can you hear me, Sompisi? All right, it looks like we still have some issues with the sound there in Durban, but we do know that he's in studio. But while we wait for him to be able to reach us, gentlemen, very worrying trend that is continuing unabated in KwaZulu-Natal. What is your take on the matter, Ralph?
It is quite worrying, and it is becoming part and parcel of the history of KZN, where we see this political assassination. I also think that there are two ways of looking at this thing. There are two dimensions to this. First is an act of pure criminality, which needs to be dealt with by the police. I mean, I've seen rumors about what is the cause of this and so forth. That has to be dealt with. But there is much bigger issue which has got to do with the national leadership of the party, or maybe the party at national level. I think what we are seeing is intensive regionalization of the ANC, where the regions actually they've got their own political dynamics to a point where they are not deferring to the national leadership of the party. Literally, you have the ANC here. It doesn't have a voice except for just saying that we condemn what has happened there. But they've lost control of their regions because these killings are happening because of some political expediency at regional and localized level, where the party, it's not really in touch of that leadership, or at least cannot rein in the leadership thereof. If the party was strong locally, especially if it could exert its control or even hegemony of its members at the local level, at least you wouldn't be seeing this at the scale that you are seeing. But now you have the ANC, which they must be careful because they are becoming some form of a conglomeration of interest group at local level where people are killing each other for their own interest, and the party at national level can do nothing about that, both within the state, because you have state resources where you can actually investigate this perfectly as a pure criminal matter. That is a problem with that regard. And you also have the question of political leadership at the regional level, which is also a problem as well.
All right, we do have Usompisi ready for us now. Babu Usompisi, thank you so much for joining us. Good morning to you and welcome to Media Monitor.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you and good morning to the viewers at home. So thanks for having me.
Let's talk about the outcome of Friday's meeting between yourselves and the NEC. Do tell us, because we've been getting very mixed reviews about what the final decision. Are you going to appeal or not appeal the court decision?
Well, Alicia, we had a very, very interesting discussion with the national officials of the African National Congress, reflecting on the judgment handed down by the full bench of the Pietermaritzburg High Court. I think we came to the understanding, a common and a shared understanding, that the issues dealing with the judgment of the court has far-reaching implications. And it requires to be understood properly and within this context by ourselves, the provincial leadership and the national leadership. But at the end of the meeting, the consensus was that this matter must be taken before the National Executive Committee of the ANC, which is going to be convening on the special meeting during the course of this week, so that a final decision can be taken. You will know that we have had no precedents in the past as a province of KwaZuluNatal where a judgment would have been handed down against the sitting leadership. And therefore, it was appropriate that having done our own considered reflections on what it means and what are its implications to the ANC, we also sought an urgent audience with the national leadership so that we can interface on the meaning and the implications of the judgment.
Is any of those implications the fact that the ruling effectively means that Senzo Mchunu could be the legitimate leader of the ANC in your province? Do you as a party recognize him as such at this stage?
No, it's not necessarily, there's no implication on reinstating the former Provincial Executive Committee. You see, the conference that was due to happen after in 2016 would have taken place in May 2016, according to what the judges were saying. And you know that we're in 2017, in an event where anything were to be happening in relation to the status of the current Provincial Executive Committee, it means, it doesn't automatically means that you reinstate the former leadership, but it only means that if you were to reconvene the conference, the National Executive Committee, as the supreme organ of the ANC in between national conferences, takes over the running of the province and will probably appoint a task team that must work on his behalf in order to prepare for the conference. But it's not automatic that those who were there will have to be reinstated. It's a matter that becomes a prerogative of the National Executive Committee, exercising its leadership, taking into account all factors that should be considered in making such a profound decision.
Sompis, you know, there's been a lot of questions that have arisen from this matter. A lot of people are saying, what happens to the decisions like, you know, those to, of course, institute disciplinary measures against ANC MP Dr. Makosi Khoza? And of course, if this will have any bearing come the elective conference in December, what do you make of those assertions, sir?
That's one of the issues that is essentially one of the issues that we had to settle with the national officials of the ANC. Whether or not, in the light of the current circumstances, the disciplinary proceedings against Comrade Makosi should proceed. The view that was adopted by the national leadership is that Comrade Makosi has not necessarily been charged by the Provincial Executive Committee. She has been charged by the ANC. Of course, the PEC acting on behalf of the ANC in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. But secondly, there was an acknowledgement that even if this PEC were to be set aside for whatever reasons based on the judgment handed over by the High Court in Pietermaritzburg, it does not mean that a decision to charge Comrade Makhosi for contravening the ANC constitution would also have been set aside. You see, the court made very clear distinction between the decisions that were taken by the conference and the decisions that were subsequently taken by the Provincial Executive Committee. Those decisions have not been challenged, have neither been questioned, nor have they been changed or rescinded by the decision of the court in Pietermaritzburg. So, in our view, there must always be a distinction between what was before the court of law, its determination, and what others may therefore wish to be, which has not yet been settled in any platform, including the court of law, and therefore remains what we can define as the wish being the father to the thought, and not necessarily something that has been settled by the court of law.
All right, and Sompisi, you spoke of corrective measures arising from this ruling. Did the court specify in its findings the exact time frame that the ANC has to rectify the matter before maybe the elective conference in December? And talk to us about the political killings that are currently taking place in KwaZuluNatal. We know there's a commission that's been set up. Just talk to us about what means is the ruling party putting in place to make sure that this comes to an end?
Well, Alicia, in relation to what happens between now and the national conference and the time frame provided by the court, there was no particular time frame which was articulated by the court in its judgment. Of course, in terms of what our legal jurisprudence allows, the PEC has at least 15 days within which it should make up its mind and decide whether or not it appeals the judgment. Okay. In an event where the judgment were to be appealed, it effectively means that the PEC remains a provincial executive committee and will continue to be in office and exercise leadership guided by the ANC constitution until such time where an appeals, a Supreme Court of Appeal may come to a different conclusion. So in that context, the PEC remains in office. The PEC has expressed its intention to appeal the judgment, and that is the reason why we had to seek for an urgent meeting with the national leadership of the ANC. The fact that we have done that, therefore, it retains the status of the Provincial Executive Committee because nature doesn't allow vacuum. We wouldn't be without a structure by now if there was a decision to effectively dissolve the PEC following the judgment handed down by the High Power Court in Pietermaritzburg. But the reason why we're still in office is because there is an understanding both internally in the ANC, and we believe that is also shared by the courts or the judges who handed down the judgment, that within the next 15 days it will be determined whether or not we appeal, and in the course of the appeal, as I said, we remain in office. And then with regard to
this
very painful
go on. Yes, go on, Sompisi.
Yeah, with regard to this very painful experience we are going through as the leadership of the ANC and the people of KwaZulu-Natal, following the ongoing killings that began on the eve of the local government elections and soon after the local government election, and seems to be sustained in certain areas, particularly in Moses Mapita region as well as in Herigwara region. You see, we understood the complexity of this challenge, and as a PEC, more than 9 months ago, we called for the establishment of the Commission of Inquiry, which the Premier acceded to that call and established the Commission of Inquiry. The second intervention we called for was for the Minister of Police and the President of the Republic to dispatch a high-level team of investigators who should come to KwaZulu-Natal and work with the law enforcement agencies in our province in order to detect and follow the criminality that has been going on. But thirdly, as a provincial executive committee, we appointed our own team, which is essentially dealing with what we defined and characterized as ongoing political tensions, which may provide a fertile ground for the ANC cadres or members of the ANC to become prime suspect in an event where somebody or any of our leaders is being killed. All of those interventions are proceeding. In our own view, there has been a decline leading to the elections, and soon after the elections, we're almost having comrades killed. Almost every week we're having funerals. I'm not saying it has dramatically declined, but there is at least a discernible decline, which we believe is as a result of these combined initiatives and interventions, which we are hoping, supported by the masses of our people, would lead us to the point where we can overcome the scourge of killing in our province.
Thank you, Sompisi. Just before I let you go, a very quick one. What do you say to this call? There's been a lot of members from the ANC, particularly in KwaZuluNatal, coming from this case saying that they don't have the proper relevant structures to air their discontent or their grievances about what's going on within the party. What do you say to this? Are there any corrective measures that the ruling party as a whole is trying to seek to address these problems?
Well, the Provincial Executive Committee and all our regions are all hard at work, working with civil society organizations, firstly to deal with what appears to be local tensions occasioned by processes leading to the local government elections, but also tensions that are developing and have been evolving because of other reasons that within a particular community or a particular area there would be problems amongst our people who may not necessarily, some of them being in the ANC. You see, one of the recognition we've made is that in some instances people who have been arrested following the death of some of our deployed cadres, you talk about the councillor in Upongolo, you talk about the ANC deputy mayor in Richmond, even the ANC speaker in Mzimkhulu and the former deputy secretary of the ANC. People who were arrested there were not politically, were not in any way connected to any of our leaders, let alone the African National Congress as a party. It would be, at some point, it would be relatives, it would be a spouse or a fiancé, it would be somebody that has purely no links whatsoever with the ANC. The attitude we've adopted as a Provincial Executive Committee is that we must confront criminality for what it is. We should avoid a temptation to be consumed by definition as to whether this is a political killing or merely a killing, and confront what is before us and allow the police and the Commission of Inquiry to ultimately determine if any of these killings are as a result of comrades in the ANC. Because anybody who kills, irrespective of their political affiliations, must be apprehended, must be arrested, must be made to be accountable, because killing cannot be permitted in our province. And that is the commitment we've made. We're going back to Hedikwara region on Monday as a provincial working committee to meet with all our structures, to meet with councillors, to go deeper to some of the assertions which were made in the funeral of Comrade Makaka, that a community hall somewhere in the area was built and budgeted for 3 million, and it has now been escalated to more than 39 million. There has to be consequences and accountability for that. But we do not want to take lightly public pronouncements made in funerals. We need to go deeper and interface with cold facts so that there can be tangible consequences rather than public statements which can only invoke emotions but without concrete consequences in terms of what happened to those who are involved and implicated.
Sompisi, thank you so much for your time this morning, and have yourself a great Sunday further. That is, of course, the ANC KZN spokesperson, Ubaba Mdumiseni Ntuli, talking to us about, among others, the Pietermaritzburg court case and, of course, the ongoing political killings. And as we've heard, the party is instituting some measures to try and deal with both those situations. Let's take a quick ad break. More Media Monitor after that.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people. And your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
we're back. Public Investment Corporation Chief Executive Dan Matjela had a narrow escape after reports of a plot to oust him surfaced over allegations published in the Gupta-linked media. It's being reported that the plot was conceived 3 months ago as part of attempts by the Guptas to capture the PIC, which is the biggest investor in our economy with 1.87 trillion rand under its wing and manages funds on behalf of all government employees' pension funds. However, there has been massive resistance with, amongst others, the Federation of Trade Unions, SAFTU, calling on workers to have a direct representative in the PIC board so as to ensure some form of transparency. The board has, however, flatly denied that it has been captured. Meanwhile, KPMG South Africa CEO Trevor Hull and 7 other senior executives have all resigned, and the auditing firm has withdrawn its South African Revenue Services Rogue Unit report.
This PIC story needs to be understood in the context of a captured state, in the context of why it is useful to get your hands on the 1.8 trillion of the PIC, understood in the context of how historically we have sold good assets, the golden goose that lays the golden eggs.
What's your take on the PIC matter, Melo?
For me, I think the interesting thing here obviously is that because the PIC has so much money that it invests in various ventures within the economy, it would obviously be advantageous to somebody to want to be able to get access to decision-making structures there. I mean, for example, if we take the issue of Eskom per se, because it's also been in the media for a lot of these shenanigans, if you will. So Eskom as a whole has sort of government guarantees to the order of about 350 billion, which are called the contingent liabilities on the SAU balance sheet, right? So what happens now is that because Eskom has so much debt, it's sort of threatening our fiscal stability in the country in terms of being able to sort of carry on servicing that. Because if Eskom now is no longer able to service those debt, now it means that government needs to come in. Obviously, government now is already running a huge budget deficit, and it's going to create problems there. So part of the other problem with, part of the other avenue which Eskom can use to access funds is to get sort of the PIC to start pumping more money into Eskom, to start lending more money to Eskom and such ventures. So then in order to be able to do that, you need to have some sort of control over decision-making structures there at the PIC. So for me, I think on the one avenue, if you look at it from an Eskom perspective, from an SOE perspective, it makes sense why somebody would want to have control over what's happening at the PIC, because then the PIC would be able to direct funds to whatever SOE is ailing and is troubled. Because part of the PIC, I mean, the SOEs now, they're having problems, especially with the looming local currency credit rating downgrade to junk status. They'll have difficulty being able to access funds from private investors. This is where the PIC now would be able to step in and say, okay, fine, the private investors don't want to give you money, but here's money that we can give you from the government pension fund. So I think that...
So it will function like a creditor, so to speak.
Basically, that's exactly what it will do. So it's very much important from that sense. But then obviously you need to have some sort of control over the board structure. Remember, even when with Mcebisi Jonas was still a deputy finance minister, because he sits there on that board, and I think he chairs that board for the PIC. So now obviously now it's Sfiso Buthelezi who chairs that board, and then there's a talk that they're trying to remove some of the other executives and put more pliant executives on that board such that they can be able to facilitate some of these decisions. So I think in the grander scheme of things, what they've been saying in terms of state capture and trying to redeploy resources within government, I think there is a case to be made that the PIC, if you're going to try and redirect its mandate, you need to do it from a board level, from a director level.
Ralph, let's talk about the dramatic events at KPMG on Friday. I mean, what can we read into that? Shocking.
Well, pressure is mounting, but the sad part is that not much of this pressure comes from South Africa. We got to be honest about that.
Where does it come from,
It comes from outside South Africa. You know, the sad part about this state capture and companies that are involved is that you don't have pressure coming from within. Of course, our civil society, they are pushing, the opposition parties are pushing, but for me, they tend to gain more traction when they go to other jurisdictions. Look at what has happened to Bell Pottinger. It is because of people going into the UK jurisdiction and pushing against that. KPMG is a multinational. McKinsey is a multinational. You are going to start seeing pressure coming from outside South Africa. Whereas in South Africa, we don't have a focused investigation into this. For me, it's quite a concern that it appears to me that we are looking for people in other jurisdictions to rescue us from the I don't want to call it a mess, I'm on TV, but from the problem that we have caused ourselves here within our country, that takes away our sovereignty. It also says we are incapable of coming up with a recourse on our own. So what is happening at the KPMG is pressure from your shareholders, is also pressure from other jurisdictions where KPMG also is doing business. It will comply with pressure from those other side. Unfortunately, not from South Africa.
I'm sorry, Melo. I know you want to say something, but my director is going to kill me. We're definitely out of time. Melo Mahuleho and, of course, Mr. Ralph Mateja making a return to Media Monitor. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. I now bid you farewell, because after the break, we take a look at the Troika Summit highlights with the Umar Sophie Mugwena. Do stay with us.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the advice of our elders? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people. And your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
And we're back. The SADC Troika has urged Lesotho to submit a clear time-bound roadmap of implementation of the SADC resolutions on Lesotho. The current SADC chair, President Jacob Zuma, told the meeting on Friday that there was a need for clear and decisive action from the government of Lesotho. Lesotho is currently experiencing political tension following the recent assassination of the head of the army. President Zuma says the assassination of the head of the army sets a dangerous precedent. Joining me for this discussion is SABC News foreign editor Umar Sophie Mugwena. Sophie, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Alicia.
Look, the SADC Troika was supposed to meet later this year, but of course this meeting was bumped forward. Can you tell us why the urgency?
Well, you are aware that there was an assassination of the head of the army, and clearly that gave an indication that there is supposed to be this meeting to look at the developments in Lesotho. And it is for that reason President Jacob Zuma, as the head or currently the chair of SADC, did convene the double troika to get first-hand information in terms of what transpired. Because you'd recall that when this happened, he was on his way to China for the BRICS summit. On return, he met the facilitator, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, but also the Angolan president had already dispatched a team to go and a fact-finding team, and he was receiving that report, and resolutions were taken, for an example, to ensure that the committee that was appointed or recommended by SADC at the meeting to look at Lesotho to ensure that all the resolutions of SADC are implemented had to be strengthened or beefed up. And secondly, the issue of deployment of force, and therefore to ensure stability. And a decision was taken that there will be that kind of a deployment, but they still have to work out in terms of the numbers or perhaps the size of that deployment. And on Thursday, a day before the troika, double troika, the king was very, very upset when he was addressing the funeral or the mourners at the funeral. Let's take a listen at what the king said.
Hona wa America o Engelane o hokae ha e sale ke fumana difono tse mpotsa hona ha eno mo ho etsala le batho ba jwa ka nnete re swabile.
That's King Litsia. They're saying he has been receiving calls from America, from England, and many parts of the country. People are saying, what kind of people are you? And He is very embarrassed, and it's just a snippet of what he said there. In fact, that speech, the whole speech, I've never seen King Letsie so angry in, my entire career. The fact that I've interacted with him many times, I've seen him speaking. He's someone who always tried by all means to ensure that he's calm, but this time around he was very upset. But secondly, President Jacob Zuma also issued a stern warning to that country to say SADC cannot continue to be dealing with Lesotho all the time. They can't continue to be on the SADC Troika agenda all the time. Let's take a listen at President Jacob Zuma on Friday.
We therefore unconditionally urge the government and people of Lesotho to work towards finalizing all the required reforms within a period of 18 months.
Yeah, I saw that headline. He says we can't always be in Lesotho. Lesotho needs to start doing things for himself. So going forward, Sophie, let's wrap up.
Well, we'll see. We'll continue to monitor Lesotho, but this week the focus on the United Nations General Assembly. It's starting, and we'll continue to give update even today. Yesterday, Sharon Bryce-Pease, our correspondent chief of the SABC at the UN, he did file a report and will update our viewers. President Zuma is expected to arrive in New York later today.
All right, Masofi Mukwena, SABC News foreign editor, joining us to talk, among others, about the latest developments in Lesotho. And thank you for watching our show, Media Monitor. We are back next week, same time and place, but don't despair because I'm back in a jiffy with AM News. Don't go anywhere.